Good morning, everybody. Today we are going to introduce the different animal phyla, and we'll be looking at some of the ways we categorize animals into these different phyla. So this cladogram shows the evolution of the different animals and which ones are most closely related to each other, and then what features they sort of developed over the evolutionary history of these animals. And so most of the traits that you see on here we're going to be talking about today. One of the first features to evolve in animals is body symmetry. The body plan is how its parts are arranged. Some animals, like sponges and corals, they are asymmetrical. There's no pattern to their body plan. Other animals have radial symmetry. This is shaped like a wheel or round. So for example, jellyfish, they have radial symmetry. And starfish, they have radial symmetry as adults. As larvae, they have bilateral symmetry. Bilateral symmetry is a left and right side. And so this includes things like humans, insects, cats, and a whole bunch of other animals. In the Edpuzzle pop-up window, I would like you to identify the symmetry of these different animals. We have a snake, a chimpanzee, a coral, an anemone, a sea slug, and a starfish. Tell me which animals are asymmetrical, which have radial symmetry, and which have bilateral symmetry. So animals with bilateral symmetry have sides to their bodies. Anterior means towards the head, swapped by the face. Posterior means towards the tail. Dorsal is the backside, which is why the fin on a dolphin and sharks on their backs is called a dorsal fin. It's because it's on their back. And ventral is along the belly. The next step in evolution, once bilateral symmetry came to be, was cephalization. And cephalization means an area of concentrated sense organs. In other words, a head. If you think of your head, all the senses that are in your head, your eyes, your ears, smell, taste, that is because of this process of cephalization. So all those sensory organs get concentrated in one area of the body. That becomes the head. Which one of these, the starfish or the cuttlefish, exhibits cephalization? Another trait to evolve was segmentation, and this actually evolved a couple times in the phylogenetic tree. Animals have body segments, or certain parts, and specialization of tissue in these parts. So if you look at this earthworm, you can see all the little ridges, all the little segments that make up the worm. And even humans, we can be considered to be segmented because of the way our ribs and our vertebrae are all sort of made up of small repeating parts. So segmentation is important because it provides the means of organisms to move around. They offer some flexibility and protect sensitive organs from damage, especially the ribs and the spinal cord here. And then each segment can be separated into a different function, which allows different parts of the body to form more complex activities. Another way we can group animals into different phyla is how they go through development. So the next few slides are going to talk about development. During early development, animals begin life as a zygote, which is another word for a fertilized egg. So, a sperm cell from a male will fuse with an egg from a female, and it will begin this process of cell division and differentiation that lead to all the organs and body parts that we see. So once that zygote is fertilized, those individual cells will start to divide. Like you see in this picture, you see that one single egg cell undergoing rapid cell division. And eventually what's going to happen is you get a hollow ball of cells called a blastula. And then the next step is for the blastula to start to pinch inward to form things like the digestive system. So here's the blastula, the hollow ball of cells, and you can see it's starting to pinch inward. And this is going to create layers of cells within the blastula, and these are called germ layers. And the germ layers are destined to become different organs eventually. The outermost layer is ectoderm. That's the outermost layer, and it's going to become the skin and nervous tissue. Mesoderm is in the middle, and it's destined to become muscles or bones. Endoderm becomes the internal organs like the intestines and stomach and liver. So when I think of the difference between ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm, endo is in, so your innermost organs. And then I think mesoderm muscle. And ectoderm, I think of like I think C comes before N, so C would be the outermost layer, would be the first layer on the outside of that blastula. Now this inward pinch is the next way we classify animals, because this pinch can either become the mouth or the anus of the animal. So here we have our blastula, and we see these three tissue layers forming. We have our endoderm inside, mesoderm filling in the middle, and the ectoderm on the outside. And so this will pinch inward until it goes all the way out the other side to form the digestive tract. Now, if this hole becomes the mouth, then it is a protostome. If that hole becomes the anus in the animal, then it is a deuterostome. Most animals are protostomes. Vertebrates, like humans, and echinoderms, like starfish and sea urchins, are deuterostomes. So if we go back to this cladogram for a second, we see protostome development starts somewhere around here, and we have all these different animals that develop with the protostome, and deuterostomes all the way at the top of the cladogram with the starfish and the human. So aside from other vertebrates, our closest invertebrate relative are starfish and sea urchins. Now, most animals on that cladogram have all three tissue layers, but earlier, more primitive animals like jellyfish only have two, ectoderm and endoderm. The next way we can classify animals is on their digestive systems. More complex animals, like this worm here, have complete digestive tracts where food enters the mouth and waste exits the anus. Here. More primitive animals, like this anemone, here have something called a gastrovascular cavity. So food and waste go in through the same opening. So during their development, that blastula, that pinch that forms, never actually reaches it to the other side, which is why they only have two germ layers, the endoderm and the ectoderm. The next way we classify animals is by the presence of a body cavity, or a coelom. It's a hollow space between the body covering and the digestive tract. And we classify these based on whether or not there is a body cavity and whether that body cavity is completely lined with mesoderm. So an acoelomate does not have a coelom, no body cavity. And if you were to look at this cross section of this flatworm, you see that there's no gap in between the digestive tract and the mesoderm. Coelomates, like this earthworm and then also vertebrates, they have this gap in between the body covering and the digestive tract, and then each side is lined with mesoderm. And then finally, we have pseudocoelomates. These have a body cavity, but only the inside of the body cavity is aligned with mesoderm. There isn't any mesoderm lining the inner digestive tract. So we will talk more about which animals have which traits as we go through each animal phyla this year. But for now, we're just going to identify the animal phyla and some examples. So the earliest, most primitive animal are sea sponges. They're animals, and they are the phylum Porifera. Next, we have phylum Cnidaria. These include things like the sea anemone, jellyfish, hydras, and corals. Next, we have phylum Platyhelminthes. These are flatworms. One example is this planarian. I think these are so cute. They're little worms that live in fresh water. And then we also have this guy. This is a parasitic tapeworm that could live in your intestines as a result from eating contaminated food. But that is another animal in the phylum Platyhelminthes. Next, we have phylum Nematoda, and these are roundworms. And how I remember this is the nematode roundworms. The O is round. So one example is this parasitic nematode living in the eye of that unfortunate frog. And then we have phylum Annelida, which are segmented worms, such as this leech. As you see him stretch out, you can see all the little segments in his body. Next, we have phylum Mollusca, or mollusks. These include clams, oysters, squid, and snails. Most of these contain a hard shell, with the exception of octopuses and some squids. They lost their hard shell through evolution, but most of them have a soft body and a hard shell. Next, we have phylum Arthropoda. These include crustaceans, like this crab, insects, and spiders. And what these all have in common is that they contain hard exoskeletons. This is the largest phylum in the animal kingdom, and it contains the most number. Finally, we have, second to last, we have phylum Echinodermata. These are starfish and sea anemones, and echinoderm means spiky skin. So the spiky skin on a sea urchin or the starfish here is where they got their name. And then finally, we have phylum Chordata. This includes all animals that contain a vertebrae. Vertebrates are animals that have a backbone, so this includes things like birds, amphibians, fish, reptiles, and mammals. In the pop-up window on the Edpuzzle, please complete this matching activity. You can just type the number and the letter that matches with it. So you're going to match the animal to its phylum.